computer. Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Wednesday, March 31st, and we are delighted today to welcome Randy Rowse, longtime former restaurant owner of the Paradise, which he recently sold, and of course, 9 years on the city council, appointed in 2010, won election twice, retired in January 20th, and now is running for mayor. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us, Randy. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
So why have you decided to come back? Why do you want to be mayor?
Well, when I first went on council, because my business was right across the street from City Hall, I found myself doing a fair amount of finger wagging and whatnot. And I got to kind of a put up or shut up moment. And so that all happened. I had my 9 years and that was fine. But now as I look at it, I see issues that I don't see being resolved in a way that are the best for the community as far as I can tell. And I think that a little bit different direction would help, particularly now we're at a crossroads of coming out of the entire pandemic, where you've got State Street and the position it's in, the economy and the position that it's in, the budget and whatnot. And I think my background with, being in private business for all those years, along with, spending time in the public sector, I've got a little bit of perspective in both. And I really think that I could be of assistance right now in moving us towards a really vital and vibrant reopening.
And, I talked to you right before you left office and a couple times since about the possibility of running for mayor. And I know it was already out there. Were you somewhat ambivalent? Was it a struggle to get to this point? A lot of pros and cons?
Yeah, I did the old Ben Franklin, the pros and cons sheets and whatnot. And what I kept coming back to was the fact that I've never, when you're on council, you learn that you're passionate about things that you weren't aware you were passionate about in the community. I mean, before it was myopically about the downtown and my business and so on. And then you get involved in the entire town at large, and it gives you the perspective of, it's an amazing community. I have a lot of passion for it, and I'm probably going to be involved in one way or the other. So this came as a time that it seemed like it might be right to try to jump back in and see if I could be a significant help.
Well, I know one issue that bothered you in the last year or so that you were on council. City council seats, the mayor are supposed to be nonpartisan. And we've seen, this pretty much a takeover at City Hall by the Democratic Party. Every member now is a member of the Democratic Party, every council member. Was that a change that you saw in how people approach the business of the council in the 9 years that you were on there? And what do you think the effect of that is?
Well, I've always been a non-party person in terms of what I did and how I thought, registration notwithstanding. When I first got on council, I was along with Frank Hotchkiss, Michael Self, and Dale Francisco. And of course, the big evil thing of the day were traffic calming devices. And that was and we actually did kind of change the momentum along those lines. But there was a lot of push from the parties to go a certain way or another. And I always was kind of insulted by that, because I thought the political parties have business outside of the city. They have agendas outside of the city. They have purposes that are self-driving. And I always thought it was damaging to city business from either side of the coin, but particularly now it's so dominantly Democrat that you get things that come up and all of a sudden we're talking about Medicare for all as an agenda item. I went, well, that's a great item to talk about in some circles. City council isn't one of those circles.
So you always talked about leaving your politics at the door when you went on council. What do you mean by that?
Well, because of, I have more opinions than anybody would like to know, just like, once again, ask my family about things worldwide, about things both Democrat, Republican, about things that go on in society. And I'm passionate about those, and I'll sit down with anybody, anytime with a cup of coffee isn't about reporting about me for council, and talk about those things. But they don't belong. My feelings and my ideologies don't belong as part of what the job is in council, I feel. And so when it comes to deciding, talking about how a street should be striped, or what a condo development should look like, or all the things that you have that are relatively mundane, but they are city business and they are a concern. My outside ideologies and what I believe in really shouldn't be a part of the deal. I don't want to carry baggage in with me. I just want to focus on every item, give it its own life, its own respect, and take things ad hoc as they come.
Let me ask you about a couple of things that are directly connected to the Democratic Party platform and so on. One is, you said not too long ago that the Democratic Party and city employee unions have become one. What's the issue there for you?
Well, it's not so much the fault of the city employee unions, but there is a lot of push for unionization in general. That's part of the Democratic platform. I mean, they've been very upfront about that. That's not a big secret. And years and years ago, of course, unions were very, very strong back in the days of Detroit and whatnot. And private sector unions have become very small, and public sector unions have become very common. And even back when we started our business, back when Sheila was mayor, that wasn't really much of an influence. And now it's become more and more influential. But there's also a party lilt to it as well, which is fine. And I never see our public employees, for example, in the city. I see the employees, I see public safety, I see civil service. I don't see the union. I see our employees. The union oftentimes is almost a separate entity. I mean, they'll come and talk to council and whatnot, but I find a lot of value in staff. I find a tremendous amount of integrity and energy in staff. But sometimes the union will go, well, you didn't do X, Y, and Z. I go, well, yeah, that's a different subject altogether. I'm still very, very supportive of staff, particularly public safety.
Right. And then the other thing is, as mayor, of course, and also as a council member, you'd be involved in setting salaries and other benefits and so on. And, let's face it, a number of members of council now, take large campaign contributions from some of those same unions who you're in the business of negotiating with. Do you see what's the conflict there? Does that bother you?
It bothers me a lot. I mean, it's perfectly legal, but it is a quid pro quo. How can I take money from an organization with whom I'm going to be negotiating if I get seated? I've never understood why that was okay. I mean, my cynical side goes, yeah, I know how that happened, but I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I got in trouble immediately with the public safety unions when I first got on council, and I went to my first meeting with them. And I said, by the way, I'm not, I'd love to stand with you and give you my support and have you give me your support in return, but I'm not going to take money. And that wasn't a very popular comment at the time. Since then, the Firefighters Association did in fact endorse me last time, and they actually thought that was kind of cool, because if I do something, if I say something in support, it's because it's what I really believe. It's not because it's payback for a donation. And even if it has that appearance, that makes me uncomfortable. So I really believe in our public safety guys, and the salaries are something we talk about in confidence, in closed session. So they're not supposed to ever be talked about outside of that, just until we get to a result. So I don't feel comfortable, like I said, saying that Jerry, your union supported me, and so I'm going to have your back when we get across the negotiating table.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what my stance is when I go in there. Nobody knows what my stance was when I come out.
And then I know another specific issue that bothered you in the last couple of months when you were on council was the project labor agreement, this set aside of large public works projects for union crafts union workers. What's your concern about that?
Well, yeah, you want to get me started on that one, did you? Okay. Well, my concern was
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. there's nothing wrong with unionization. There are some relatively small amount of the private sector craft workers in town that are unionized at this point in time. When we do public projects, there's a certain percentage by law that has to be, when it's publicly financed, we have to use union help anyway. Oftentimes we can't even fill those jobs. They can't find enough of the union people, and then we have to put out the effort. This was driven by unions that are not local. When I say local, I mean city. And the term in this argument became, well, local means tri-counties, between here in LA, between here in the Mississippi River. I don't know. It just seemed there were a lot of folks in that room that were wearing union t-shirts that from LA and Thousand Oaks and San Luis Obispo making the argument. And that's fine, except that we are financing many of our public works projects, the large ones, with Measure C, which is a city issue. It is not a local tri-county, multi-county issue. And we have a set of jobs that are lined up with that. Police, or the police station, obviously, road pavement, all the things that we're doing. And now there was this thing, well, now we have to go through this extra expense to vet and to find these people. Number one, we're going through negotiations right now, so already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in just negotiations with the unions to try to see if there's a final version of this PLA that they would accept. But I just found it wrong. And yes, some of my colleagues took money from the unions. I don't really know which ones did, how much they took. I suppose I should find that out, but that's not a concern to me. But it was really a slap in the face for all the long-term major contractors in town that have been here forever, that are great community people, the skippers in town, the people that the DD Fords, the Bob Youngs, the Joe Baileys, the people that live and work in this town and hire young people and do apprenticeships for young people and participate with the schools and training programs. And it was like saying, no, that's not good enough. We're going to go to Thousand Oaks and get the next group of workers. And if somebody chooses to work, God bless them, go to it. I just think that making it a non-choice is just not something I'm in favor of. Union, if somebody chooses to form a union, then they have every right to do so, as do our public employees.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Measure C. And as I recall, you were you supported Measure C somewhat reluctantly. This is back in 2017. I think a quarter cent or half cent a bump in the local sales tax, specifically for infrastructure, for road repair, for street repair,
Correct.
and to build the police station. And a lot of people were saying, this is just going to be another payoff for the unions, blah, blah, blah. And you went out, defended it, and then the PLA came. Did you feel like that was, did that blindside you, I guess is the question.
Well, it did. I went out, we called it the Randy and Bendy show, because Bendy and I went out and we did these little song and dances for a lot of groups to talk about Measure C. And a lot of people did respond with that cynical answer, well, this is union payback. And no, this has got nothing to do with the unions. Blah, blah. So we went on, with that. And infrastructure was not going to, our road conditions were not going to be met. Police station was not going to be built without this funding. I was all in favor of it. And then when we went to the vote, I wanted a 20-year sunset, like you normally do with a tax initiative. I lost that argument. I was a little bit disgruntled. I was brought back off the ledge to go ahead and sign on it. Public safety was behind it. They weren't behind it because of the union thing. They were behind it because they saw our roads and our buildings crumbling. They saw our stations, going down the tubes, and they knew we needed this exotic financing, not for salaries, but for infrastructure. So, and Pat McElroy, our ex-fire chief, is one of the guys that talked me back off the ledge. So I was a signatory on the ballot measure to do that, and we passed it. The public let us know what their priorities were, which was pave the police station, De La Guerra Plaza, Library Plaza, on down the line. But at that time, there was nothing said or anticipated about something like a project labor agreement. That, to me, that was a bait and switch. And that way, I don't know if anyone else saw it that way, but that's how I feel about it. I just felt like sometimes we do things and people are dying to be cynical about government, and for good reason. And I think this just fed that entire feeling.
Yeah. Let me ask you about State Street. Uh, we, the council decided to close a large portion of it to traffic at the beginning of the pandemic. And obviously, it was a measure to help restaurants and to help other businesses do whatever they could. Now we're a year into it, and not to put too fine a point on it, it kind of looks like a garage sale down there. I mean, with all of the parklets, and then of course the neon green intersections, and it seems now it's as much a promenade for bicycles as it is for pedestrians. What's your assessment of where we are with State Street and what needs to happen?
Well, first thing, full disclosure, anyone that's ever, followed me, all three of you people who ever followed me, knows that I've never been a fan of street closures. And in fact, when we've had our three different consultant teams to talk about State Street and revitalization way before the pandemic, the one thing they all had in common was they didn't recommend closing off streets, at least permanently. But the move that city council made to help the restaurants and whatnot, I applauded, because they needed to do whatever it took to keep those people going. And because we were dancing to at the end of the strings of higher government powers said, you're open, you're closed, you're this, you're that. And it was whatever it takes to keep these people alive is what they needed to do. So I applaud council for doing that. But then a lot of people that have been State Street closure since I got here in the early 70s, frankly, are saying, oh, this is our moment. This is our Pearl Chase moment. And I'm going, no, yeah, Santa Barbara. I mean, I was just, walking around the other day down across the green bike lanes and all that, thinking about this place is so wonderful still. And what it needs to be is uncovered, cleaned up, needs to have another coming out party, but it doesn't need to be rebuilt, redesigned, reconfigured. I think it's, we did so much in the way of we built these wide sidewalks when we took out the lanes and took out the parking on State. Then we covered them up with planters and benches and whatnot. We systematically taken out a lot of the benches. And the more we can expose wide open sidewalk and keep that promenade, because like you said, right now it's kind of a bike freeway on State Street. I mean, now it's pedestrians go to the sidewalks, bikes on the street. I was walking there yesterday thinking, well, that's ironic. Here we are again. And then to answer all the questions it's going to take and the planning it's going to take to really convert this into a promenade, like raising the street bed, you're going to have to do that. How do you transition from open streets to closed streets? Do you ramp up and ramp down? Where does that money come from? Who maintains it? I don't think we need to build more hard structures downtown to make the town attractive and vibrant. I think we need to clean up. I think we need to, you're probably going to ask me about the whole building permits at some point. That's definitely on the table. And we need to find ways to get the private sector excited about investing again and moving forward and just moving on. And so I don't think rebuilding the whole thing at this time is really the way to go.
When I've seen your remarks a couple of times in regard to State Street saying, how do we get the genie back in the bottle? Are you referring specifically to getting the traffic back, to undoing what's been done?
No, actually, what I was about more is, as you know, I was in the business for years and I had a liquor license. And what's going on now with, cocktails to go, parklets out in the middle of the street in the public right of way, people walking around with drinks and whatnot. None of that's really kosher. It's just being abided by now because everybody wants to stay out of business's way as much as humanly possible. When it comes time to revise our design standards, to listen to HLC again, to talk about, because like you said, it looks like a yard sale. And, the parklets were not built to be permanent. They were built to do what they're doing, is being a temporary, standby. What do we do about the public right of way? Do we continue to allow that public right of way to be usurped for private enterprise at no revenue? Is that fair to everybody else? is a restaurant parklet that covers up 4 or 5 storefronts, fair to the little retail shop next door that's trying to survive? Currently, I'd say it's not. So putting the genie back in the bottle is like going, how is that conversation going to come back to where we're finally, cleaned up and run again? And when I say clean up, I'm serious about that. I mean, it's not in a condition that anybody's particularly proud of at this moment in time.
Yeah. Another issue that came up repeatedly throughout the pandemic, and this was on the economic side, involved rents and various forms of what's some called rent control, eviction, moratoriums, relocation assistance. What's your analysis and assessment of how the council handled that? Did you feel that was fair and equitable?
I would have told them just to bide their own time because the state came in with their own standards. And it's when we got in the middle of that and we said, okay, we're going to do tenant eviction moratorium ordinance, blah, 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 blah. Well, that was fine unless the landlord in your bank saying it's okay to defer mortgage payments. At that point in time, you're going, well, wait a minute, landlords are actually small business people as well, and not everyone is a character out of a Dickens. Some of them are folks they bought income properties, or they maybe their family passed down properties, and getting fair rents or whatever. And I think when we do things like that and defer things, some people who didn't need to defer said, "Why wouldn't I defer it?" It's an interest-free loan for however long it was. I really think that those are, landlord tenant relationships are private business relationships. And I think when government gets involved, it usually doesn't go well. We have a rental housing mediation task force, which I've always been a big supporter of. As a matter of fact, I led the charge to get it permanently financed. And they're a wonderful organization, both professionals and volunteers, that help the tenant landlord relationship get through problems like this. Most private landlords I know went out to their tenants proactively and said, how are we going to work this out? People weren't looking to evict people per se. Yeah, there are probably some cases, but especially in the commercial tenancies, you're going, how many commercial leases had lines of people waiting to sign those leases? And just a virtually zero. So, landlords went out and worked with their tenants to get by. The government intervention was, I don't know how necessary it was. I never saw any statistics about who was going to get evicted and who wasn't. I think there's a lot of virtue signaling going on there in my mind. I'm not talking about our local council. I'm just talking about government in general at this point in time. But I think a lot of damage was done. A lot of banking relationships were strained at most. And maybe some landlords forced out of business as well, which isn't good. Because if you sell a long-term rental property at market, it's no longer in the rental market because it can't afford to be. You sell at market price, how do you possibly rent and stay at least neutral, not negative?
Yeah. The latest state arena numbers, the requirements, or what we're supposed to get built is 8,000 new units in the next 10 years. How realistic is that? And what do you think the city is doing, or what do you think of what the city is doing in terms of the AUD and the new FAR requirements, or that they're talking about, and so on? Well, just talk a little bit about what you would do in terms of housing.
Well, first off, we average about 150 new units a year, so that's going to be a little thin when it comes to getting into 8,000. And I still always wonder about the infrastructure, the water, the power, all the things you need to populate and service those supposedly new 8,000 units. So I'm not sure where the calculus from that comes. It's like a fairness issue around California. Well, if we're going to make Lodi do this, and we certainly can't let these exclusive white beach communities get away with this, and blah, 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 blah. So what do we do about that? We started AUD when I was on council, and it took us all by storm. We didn't know how successful it was going to be. It was incredibly successful because we decoupled parking. That was the big one. That was the huge part of it. And so things were built, but they were still built by the private sector. And the private sector goes through whatever hoops they've got to go through to build these things. But when it comes to rentals, rentals are done by market. They're not done by analysis, by, unless they're somebody like the Housing Authority, for whom I have an immense amount of respect. They do a fabulous job, but there's limits to that. When things are built, they're going to be built for markets. Council do. The council says, well, then let's do some inclusionary housing. Let's do 10%. Oh, no, let's do 50. No, let's do 20. I go, well, why don't you just go to 50? Because none of them are going to get built anyway. And because, you're talking about an investor getting together with a group of investors and maybe getting a 4 or 5% ROI. And that's not going to, if that's the home run, good luck getting that group of investors to chime in. So when people, why don't they build things for people to live in? It's still risk. It's still money. Support the Housing Authority? Absolutely, 100%. I love those guys. Whatever we can do for them, we can do for them. Can we build 8,000 units by that token that are going to be affordable? I don't think so for a moment. We're a built-out city. We don't have a lot of vacant land to do this in. And oftentimes we convert to multi-unit developments. We tear up some old rental housing and displace people doing that. And then all of a sudden it's gentrification. And so not an easy solution, Jerry. I got to tell you, I'm a little suspect of how RENA numbers are actually calculated, but that's neither here nor there for me. That's all part of the great urban planning divide between, rubes like me and people that understand it. So, but I think the best thing we can do, the best possible thing we do is work with the private sector and say, what is it going to take to make you want to do X? And is it, and I think a lot of it's going to be certainty within the permit process, not just cutting permit fees or doing the zoning differently. It's like, what's it going to take to actually make sure that when you say I'm going to have this permit in 8 months, that I have a permit in 8 months? And I think that's a big part of it.
And when the X that you reference is just so I'm clear, building housing for that middle class, missing middle group, teachers, cops, firefighters, and so on, correct?
Right. Well, and you say that too. It's really funny because there hasn't been a political campaign I've ever seen, at least nationally, that didn't mention a middle class tax cut. Of course, what have we never gotten in our lives is a middle class tax cut. So it's hard to do that. When we were first doing Plan Santa Barbara, and we were talking about, $800,000 condos or 800 square feet. And that was the idea back then. And we were talking about for purchase. At the time, it was going to be $800,000. And I thought, well, given the average median income, how is that workforce housing? Number one. And number two is at that time, there were 3 2s down in Ventura for $250,000. So I thought, will I make that drive for that difference? I go, yeah, because at some point, you're going to do something real crazy, like meet somebody and become a couple, and do something even crazier, like have children. And suddenly that condo isn't what's working for you.
Yeah.
So, people don't come to Santa Barbara or move to Santa Barbara necessarily for the urban experience. We have kind of a pastoral, almost quasi-rural experience. You have the great outdoors. We have this wonderful environment, mountains and beaches. And so you're not coming here to live in an urban setting per se. Granted, we need some of that to make some affordable housing, and that's what the AUD was all about. But without subsidies, it's going to be really hard to imagine how anybody's going to build something that they're going to call it, workforce housing, unless somehow we attract the kind of jobs that are going to increase the average median income, which would be okay with me as well.
Yeah. How does the housing issue align with homelessness in your view? The current emphasis among homeless advocates is, put people in housing. That's what we need to do. I know you've in the past talked a lot about addiction issues and other things. What's your take on homelessness, which has increased during the pandemic by all measures?
Well, I'm not exactly by all measures. Actually, the raw number of them isn't that much higher. It's that the county said don't that we shouldn't have these people inside in shelters. And I see that. So they've kind of been leaving well enough alone, not enforcing the camping laws, the tent camping laws, that is, and whatnot. But now that's starting to come to a close. I always kind of bristle at the broad brush term homelessness because it's a simplistic term. It's not dynamic enough, and it connotes that the solution to homelessness is be a home. Simple enough. Let's warehouse all these people. Well, clearly, anybody that's in the business, in the profession of dealing with homelessness, will tell you that you can't house your way out of this. There's so many dynamic things you have to do. Granted, shelter would help if only it comes to making constant contact with people, but a lot of people are shelter resistant. And so how do you deal with that? I think housing and rents have to do with it? There may be a factor of that. I certainly wouldn't lay that in there because, like I said, if you built 1,000 homes and you sheltered 1,000 people, I think you'd have a new population on the street. And I actually do. That may not be fair and that's anecdotal, but that's the way I think it is. We need to focus on taking care of the real problematic people. And when I say that, I mean the people that have behavior issues, that are not mentally capable of either taking care of themselves or do things that we consider nuisance behavior in the downtown, or street crime or whatever. I think that's actually a relatively small percentage in number. We have to focus like lasers on those folks and get them taken care of. And then as the other populations, we're not going to be able to house everybody. But I do think that homelessness has a lot of issues in drug treatment. And I've been working with a couple of folks that I won't name names, but that have been involved in this. They're talking about trying to get it so we can have more of an outreach that focuses on that. It has constant contact with people on the street. That doesn't just say it's either police or nobody. And making sure that you have to have some security backup sometimes. But you got to contact the people we're seeing on the street today. You shouldn't be there. The people we need to provide for the common cleanliness, the common health, and the common vibrancy. And if we suppress it with that, we're going to lose everything. We need to really go out there proactively with a large non-sworn force, with a large force of people like CityNet, but even and the SB Act people are gearing up for this, but we have to actually get out there and interface with these people on a very constant basis. And right now, as you see from walking around the street, we're not really doing that. Not to the level I'd like to see it anyway.
Yeah. So what grade or what assessment would you give the city for the way that it's handling homelessness right now?
Oh, I think about a C, maybe at the most. But one of the problems is for me, Jerry, is philosophy. Philosophy is we need to raise more money for homeless programs. You could drop barrels of money out of a B-52. That's not what's going to make the difference. And you can't just apply the same values to, oh my God, they wouldn't be out there if they didn't want to. Well, I've been in the bushes at 4 a.m. I've done point in time counts. I've done all these things. I've interviewed folks and they're all different. They're all individuals. They all have there's not one story. You got to support places like Transition House. I mean, there's a place that does absolutely fabulous work, especially with single moms and children. I mean, that's got to be number one priority. You have places that are non-government oriented, like Rescue Mission, who has one of the highest levels of recovery after 5 years of anybody, private or public, that I know of. But those are people that have hit rock bottom, and Rolf has a separate thing going on there. Chuck Flax does a great job with Path and what he's got there. So we've got good work and good people in place. But if you notice, like LA and San Francisco, they keep pushing more and more resources at it, and the problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And during the quote unquote Great Recession, we talked about, well, it's the economy and unemployment. That's why you see so many people. And there's a trajectory of homelessness. Well, then after the Great Recession, after the recovery, when things got better, that trajectory didn't dip at all. It just kept going up. So clearly it wasn't that simplistic of a solution. Employers all over town right now are looking for employees. People are risking their lives across the border to come to work. So obviously that's not the issue itself. So we have to go after it in a more professional way, not just throw money at it that we raise at beautiful fundraisers. We have to go after it in a very proactive, very face-to-face, very resourceful way. That means that we're going to go after it with like I say, with non-swarms, with people from CityNet, people from SB Act. But we can't just do it in the meeting room. We have to be out on the street talking to these people. And they're doing some of that, but not at the level I'd like to see.
All right. Another thing that came out during that came out of the pandemic year, of course, we had a Black Lives Matter protest. The police officer is on trial now in Minneapolis for the George Floyd killing. And so now we have this move for a civilian oversight of the police department. Are you generally in favor of that as an idea? And also, there were a lot of phrases like systemic racism that were being used in the public discourse. Do you think that there is systemic racism at the Santa Barbara Police Department?
Okay, so the idea of oversight is fine. The execution has been lumpy at best and will continue to be so. What happened back in Minneapolis was horrific, and it was there for the whole nation to see, and it really lit a torch. And it really dug up some feelings that were pretty clearly smoldering in communities all over the country. Where I got upset was, not to throw the council under the bus, but I did write them a letter after this happened and said, make sure that you understand that your current police chief at the time was Lori Luno, had a lot of very progressive programs like implicit bias training, things that she did with the community policing cops at the time. That was so far ahead of the curve. And matter of fact, when they were presented a list of demands, Lori had already done about half of those in her programs. Council never really gave them, never gave our cops the credit they deserved until about getting ready to retire. And I was really upset about that. I let them know I was upset about that. And if you walk with our personnel, and I've done that, when you walk up, you'll see compassion and human understanding that you will amaze you. And yeah, they're individuals. There's likely to be some people that are having a bad day or whatnot. They're people too. But I was so impressed, and of course, with our restorative police people like Hove and and Craig Burley and Ed Olson, people like that do amazingly fabulous work. But it's one client at a time. So anyway, the reaction to that was, let's form an oversight commission. I thought, well, don't we already have a police and fire commission? And couldn't we repurpose that, or maybe expand it and really let people know, how we're feeling about it, about police oversight? I also didn't see incident reports that said, well, we're trying to solve for X here. I go, well, if you have to solve for X, let's figure out what X is first. So to me, it was a lot of symbolism. And, they have they had a oversight committee to select the oversight. And then they're going to have this very large committee, and larger committees aren't usually better than smaller committees, as I recall. And what's going to be their power? What's going to be their purview? I don't know. So now, is there systemic racism within PD? I don't know. I don't know that answer. That's a great question, and we certainly talked about that a lot. Even when Cam was on the force, we talked about our relationships with the Latino community, gangs and whatnot. That's a question I really couldn't answer. I certainly couldn't deny it, but I couldn't confirm it. If there is, I'm only aware of it to the tune that people in the public have said, yes, we believe there is. So I don't know. I don't know how you really determine that. I certainly wouldn't abide it were I in office and I was aware of it. You're when you take that oath, you're supposed to avoid things like, or prevent things like racism, sexism, whatnot. That's part of your whole job. But what's in the hearts of individuals, I don't know. The Floyd thing, like I said, was so horrifically bad policing that the police, I didn't meet one cop that defended that for a moment. They were probably more horrified than most civilians would be, just because it's reflected on them all. And they all, I mean, a lot of those cops were like sick to their stomach when they saw that happen. That was just not necessary. It was poor policing. There was no excusing it. So I don't know what's going to happen in that trial, but does that relate to Santa Barbara PD? There's the fact that the police, I don't know. I look at the individuals. I know the people behind the badges. It's hard for me to go there because I know these people. I know so many of them personally.
So we've had this conversation and debate at City Hall over the last couple of weeks about cannabis, about retail cannabis licenses and so on. And I know, as I recall, you were somewhat more reluctant about pushing ahead full steam with that issue than some of your colleagues at the time.
That's politely put.
I mean, what do you think about it now? And specifically, this one particular of the 3 retail licenses that was granted after this long process and then flipped for everybody estimates at least a couple of $1 million to some company in Miami, which is, now operating a shop, but the place never went in business.
Right.
Number one. So there's that. What's your take on it?
Well, to start out with, I was not a fan of doing this in the first place, which I think was very publicly clear to people because we had enough problems advertising the medical marijuana stores when Eric Holder kind of switched his stance on, property and whatnot, and it's still Schedule I drug. And my whole list of demands, what I thought would be good, would be just like a fulfillment center and a delivery system and not storefronts. I lost that argument in a big way as well. So the design of the selection process was meant to keep a firewall between council and applicants, which I think was absolutely the professional and correct thing to do. Just too much influence floating around, too much money, all these things that involve it. I did never see that when we got ready to do the ordinance. I've never seen a council so proactively engaged in trying to get people in business. I've never seen the enthusiasm. We've got to get these people in business. We've got to lessen the fees. We should waive the fees. We should have a tax holiday. All these things came out, and I was just gobsmacked sitting there. I thought, what is going on? I mean, I have my cynical ideas what might be going on, but once again, I don't know. So here we are now, and this thing comes up where they flip the license. I don't know about the numbers. The numbers, once again, are all hearsay. I think there was an asset sale of an entire company to another party, and I think that license was part of the assets. I don't know how they assigned the value. That's how I understand it. And the way I look at it is kind of like I had. It's part of the asset you sell. You have the applicant has to be, or the buyer has to be approved and go through whatever vetting they go through. But it is an assignable asset. Now, the license itself flipped for a couple million. I have no idea. But it was it went through the process and went through whatever vetting process they had in the administration. I do not think council should reopen this process. I do not think we should be expanding these facilities, even for their own good. For gosh sakes, how many do you need? We already have our side of our population qualifies in terms of what is necessary for about 1 dispensary. It has 3 plus medical, plus 3 medical allowed, which are, I guess they're kind of moot anyway now. All these dispensaries for this little population. Oh, we need more. I go, well, let's watch Lompoc for a while. They went Wild West on. Let's see what happens with them. I don't like it. I think it hasn't dented the black market one iota. I don't think it will. I think there's still a very robust delivery system, in town. I don't think this bringing things out of the shadows is. Ask Carpinteria how much they're liking life right now, being the new agricultural center of the Western world. I mean, it's the exponential growth should worry of anything like that should worry people, and it worries me. And and I also worry. I worry about just as I see the THC content, and I see kids on the street that are 17 or 18-year-old just baked. I don't know if it's because of the dispensaries. I think they're probably going to get it anyway. but just this acceptance, this normalization, I think should give people some pause. I think it's there's a blowback coming, and I think it's kind of here.
All right. Hey, let me just ask you a question about the politics. You're one of 4 candidates running for mayor, including the incumbent, Kathy Murillo. I know you were the vice mayor when she took over in early 2018. And I mean, I recall that with that whole SB CAG, Jason Dominguez thing, you were very supportive of her and told people, let's, give her a chance. But now you're running against her. How would you assess the difference as a voter looks at a criteria of choice in a campaign between you and the mayor, and what would you say about the job she's done?
Well, yeah, first of all, yes, I did work with Kathy in her first year, and we worked together on a lot of stuff, and it was, as you might recall, it was kind of a rough start because it was the Thomas Fire and debris flow right in that first council meeting we had. And since then, of course, we've had this whole COVID and pandemic thing. So it's really not very fair to sit on the sidelines and bark in at the coach when these extraordinary circumstances have come up, and say, well, I would have done X, Y, and Z. I think there's a lot of things that I would not have done and gone with, and mostly they relate to things that are extra city issues, things that are not related directly to the city, things like the PLA, things like having an agenda item about Medicare for all. I think there's a lot of that stuff that's where our real differences lie. I think that there's a lot of ideology and a lot of political, shall I say, platform issues that are there that I personally reject. Now, that's Kathy. That's also some of the other folks on council at the same time. But once again, it's really hard to look at it and say I'm going to give her a grade on the job, because this job was really different this year. I mean, it was, and how would I have handled it differently? I go, I would like to think I could have run shorter meetings, but I don't know. I would like to think that I would like to keep things focused on the city. I would like to not get into causes that have no real authority run by the city, but really, are outside of the city. So that's really about it. I don't, I'm not going to, just dump on Kathy, the individual, the mayor. We certainly have been opposite on a lot of things, but I was opposite of a lot of folks. I was the one on a lot of 6-1 votes that last year I was on council, as you may remember. So,
right, which begs the question: how does a man who's against a plastic straw ban expect to be elected mayor?
That was an interesting episode. It was really funny. Real quick anecdote about that. So when Hillary Hauser came to us and talked to us about, what if you guys, did the straw thing here in your restaurants and all that, and everyone that I know of did it voluntarily. And no, then we had to do a law. And then, of course, Jason had his very famous quote about controlling everybody's actions. And I went, man, did we just jump off the bus there? So it was just, to me, it was one of those really unnecessary symbolic things that, well, Malibu does it. And I go, well, good for Malibu. I really want to be like Malibu when I grow up. So laws don't always fix things. Ordinances are ways for people in our position to say, hey, I did my thing. I made a law against, whatever it is. And then, but I did the law. I did, if it didn't happen, it didn't happen. So when you think about the number of unenforced laws on the books, you're going, okay. But we had already, as a community, gone to the alternate straw or no cutlery by our customers were saying, do you really have to have that? I go, no, you don't. We'll get rid of that. Customers are pretty forceful, opinion drivers. You don't need City Hall to do it for you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Randy Rowse, thank you so much. I kept you over here a little bit, but I appreciate you taking the time. And I'm sure we'll be talking more as we head toward the election, now a mere 7 months away. But I can't get it going.
A long, bumpy horseback ride. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Randy, thanks. I appreciate it.
All right, Jerry. Thank you.
Stay safe.